Brandon Swanson was a 19-year-old with his entire future ahead of him when he vanished into thin air on May 14, 2008. A student at Minnesota West Community and Technical College in the small town of Marshall, he was described by his parents as a responsible, level-headed young man who loved the outdoors and had a sharp, analytical mind. He had just finished celebrating the end of the spring semester with friends, a typical night of socializing that should have ended with a safe drive home to his parents' house in Lind, a quiet rural community about 12 miles away. At around 1:54 in the morning, however, his parents, Brian and Annette, received a call that would irrevocably shatter their lives. Brandon was on the line, his voice calm but laced with frustration. He explained that he had taken a wrong turn somewhere in the pitch-black countryside and had accidentally driven his 1999 Oldsmobile Alero into a shallow ditch. He assured them he was not hurt, the car was not badly damaged, and he was not in any immediate danger. He simply could not get the car out on his own and needed his father to come help him. What followed over the next 47 minutes was a prolonged, increasingly confusing phone conversation that would become the stuff of nightmares, as father and son tried to decipher Brandon's location using only the vague, indistinct landmarks of the rural Minnesota night. They discussed back roads, gravel paths, a water tower, and a cattle shed, with Brandon confidently asserting he could see the lights of Lind in the distance, a detail that would later prove to be a catastrophic geographical miscalculation. As Brian got into his own vehicle to begin the search, he kept his son on the phone, their voices the only tether to reality in the vast, empty darkness that surrounded the young man. That tether was about to be severed in a way that would defy all logical explanation, leaving behind only a void of silence and a family forever trapped in that May morning. Then came the moment that has haunted investigators and the Swanson family for over 18 years. As Brian drove through the desolate countryside, straining his eyes for any sign of his son's car, Brandon's voice on the other end of the line suddenly changed. His calm, analytical tone fractured into a sharp, startled exclamation. Two words that have been seared into his father's memory forever. "Oh, shit." There was no scream, no cry for help, no frantic explanation of what had just startled him. Instead, the line went absolutely dead, replaced by a hollow, static silence. But it was the sound that followed, or rather, the specific quality of the sound that accompanied his exclamation, that has fueled endless speculation and dread. Brian later recounted that he did not hear a gunshot, a car crash, or a struggle. What he heard was a sudden, sharp, rustling noise, almost as if the phone had been violently wrenched from his son's hand or as if Brandon had stumbled over a precipice into thick underbrush. Brian immediately began shouting his son's name into the receiver, his own heart pounding, his voice rising in panic. There was no response. He called Brandon's phone back repeatedly, his fingers trembling as he redialed, but each call went straight to voicemail, a clear indication that the phone had either been powered off, destroyed, or had its battery removed, as coverage in that area was not so poor that it would skip straight to voicemail without ringing. Brian drove faster, frantically searching every gravel road, every farm access path, and every dark tree line he could find, his headlights cutting through the suffocating rural blackness, illuminating nothing but empty fields. He eventually contacted the local authorities in Lind, who initiated a search of the immediate area. Deputies combed the ditches and fields around Lind, but dawn broke with no sign of Brandon or his Alero. The search was broadened over the following days, utilizing bloodhounds, helicopters, and volunteers on foot, but the expansive, sparsely populated landscape swallowed every lead. The Swanson family's hope began to curdle into a cold, creeping dread as days turned into a week, and no trace of the missing teenager was found anywhere in the vicinity of their hometown. The official narrative was grim and stagnant, until a critical piece of technological evidence came to light that would upend everything they thought they knew and plunge the case into an even deeper, more inexplicable mystery. It took several agonizing days for investigators to think to check the data from Brandon's cell phone service provider. When they finally obtained the ping location, the signal from the nearest cell tower that had last communicated with his phone, the result sent a chill through the entire investigation. The tower was not near Lind. It was located more than 25 miles to the east, near the tiny, unincorporated hamlet of Porter, Minnesota. In a flash of horrifying realization, they understood that Brandon had been catastrophically lost, disoriented in the featureless dark, and was not even in the same county as his parents. His descriptions of landmarks had been tragically, fatally wrong. Acting on this new data, search teams swiftly redeployed to the rural areas around Porter and the nearby town of Taunton. It took only hours before a deputy made the discovery that would reframe the entire case. Brandon's 1999 Oldsmobile Alero was found abandoned in a shallow drainage ditch along a remote gravel road, exactly where he had described it to his father. The discovery should have been a breakthrough, but it only deepened the terror. There were no signs of a struggle around the vehicle. The doors were unlocked, the keys were in the ignition, and his wallet, cash, and debit card were all still inside. It was as if he had simply stepped out of the driver's seat and walked away. And more hauntingly, where? He had been on the phone with his father just minutes after leaving the car, recounting his surroundings. The area around the car was vast, open farmland crossed with creeks and thickets, but searchers descended upon it with renewed urgency. However, the immediate and exhaustive grid search of the area around the vehicle, conducted by ground teams, horse patrols, and aircraft, yielded absolutely nothing. Not a single footprint, not a scrap of clothing, not a disturbed patch of grass. In that wide, empty prairie, a 19-year-old man had seemingly dematerialized into thin air. The implications were unspeakably grim. How could he have exited the car, walked into an open field, and simply vanished without leaving a single trace for the most sophisticated search techniques to find? Theories ranging from a sudden medical episode to a purposeful disappearance were floated, but none fit the facts. The most chilling possibility, one that investigators have never been able to rule out, is that he was not alone out there, that someone else was in that darkness with him, someone who made sure no trace would ever be found. Today, Brandon Swanson's case remains one of the most profoundly disturbing missing person mysteries in American history. He was officially declared legally dead in 2016, but for his parents, there is no closure, only an infinite, unresolved void. Brian Swanson has spent years traversing the rural backroads of Minnesota, relentlessly searching, never giving up on the grim hope of finding any remnant of his son. The "oh, shit" moment remains a phantom in the family's life, a permanent psychological scar that represents the exact second their son's world, and theirs, came to a catastrophic, inexplicable end. What happened in the final moments of that phone call? Did he stumble upon something he was never meant to see? Did he fall into an abandoned well or a sinkhole that was subsequently obscured? The ground around the vehicle area has been scanned with ground-penetrating radar, and even that yielded no anomalies. Was he targeted by a predator, human or animal, who left no trace? The area is known for rugged terrain, including the Yellow Medicine River, which was drag-searched repeatedly. Yet, nothing. The most harrowing aspect of the case is the sheer silence that enveloped his disappearance. There was no cry, no scuffle, no prolonged struggle on the open phone line, just a single, startled exclamation and a violent, rustling noise, followed by a complete and total cessation of life as he knew it. It is as if the rural Minnesota night simply reached up and swallowed him whole, erasing every physical vestige of his existence. The psychological terror of this case lies not in monsters or ghosts, but in the unbearable reality of a young man who was speaking to his father one second and erased from the earth the next. The open phone line, the rural isolation, the minute-by-minute description of his surroundings, and the absolute impossibility of his vanishing have made the Brandon Swanson case a chilling testament to the terrifying fragility of human existence. No one knows what he saw, what he stumbled into, or who, or what may have been waiting for him in the darkness outside his stranded car. His family still waits, tormented by the sound of those two final words, left to wonder in the dark, forever, whether their son is lying in an unmarked grave just feet from where searchers walked, or if he is somehow still alive, trapped in a nightmare from which he can never wake. The case is not a story, it is a living, breathing horror for the people who loved him, and it has no ending.